My brother called 3 weeks before his wedding. His voice was unusually calm. "Please don't come." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Why?" There was a pause. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't want people knowing you're my sister." The room went silent. Before I could respond, my mother took the phone. "We've told everyone you're living overseas. Just stay away and don't create problems." I hung up shaking. I cried that night. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply accepted their decision. Then, on my brother's wedding day, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My name is Hannah Parker. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, my family treated my younger brother like he was the future, the pride, the success story, the one everyone was supposed to admire. Meanwhile, I was simply Hannah, reliable Hannah, responsible Hannah, the daughter who quietly handled problems while everyone else celebrated someone else's achievements. My brother, Ethan, was 3 years younger than me. Growing up, he could do no wrong. If he earned average grades, my parents praised his potential. If he quit another job, they called him adventurous. If he made mistakes, they called them learning experiences. But when I made sacrifices, nobody noticed. I worked through college, helped pay household bills when money was tight, drove my parents to appointments, remembered birthdays, organized family events, handled the responsibilities nobody wanted. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't wealthy. I worked as an office administrator for a local property management company. It was honest work, stable work I was proud of. But according to my family, Ethan was the success because he worked in luxury real estate and spent most of his time posting photos online beside expensive cars that didn't belong to him. Over the years, I learned not to argue. People see what they want to see. So I focused on building a peaceful life. Then Ethan got engaged. The moment he announced it, my parents acted as if a royal wedding had been scheduled. The venue was extravagant. The guest list was enormous. Every family conversation became about Ethan and his fiancée, Chloe. Honestly, I was happy for him. Whatever issues existed between us, he was still my brother. I bought a wedding gift, requested time off work, even offered to help with planning if they needed anything. Nobody accepted the offer. Still, I assumed I'd be sitting with the family on the big day. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang. "Ethan." I answered immediately.
"Hey," I said.
His voice sounded unusually serious. "Hannah, we need to talk." I laughed. "That sounds dramatic." He didn't laugh back. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. "What is it?" There was a long pause. Then he sighed. "Please don't come to the wedding." For several seconds, I genuinely thought I'd heard him wrong.
"What?"
"I don't want you there." The words felt unreal. I sat down slowly. "Why?" Another pause. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "I don't want people knowing you're my sister." My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. Ethan continued. "A lot of important people are attending." I stared at the wall in disbelief. "What does that have to do with me?" His answer came instantly. "You don't fit the image." The room seemed to spin. I felt heat rush into my face. Before I could respond, another voice appeared on the call. My mother. "Hannah, please don't make this difficult." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You agree with him?" My mother sighed heavily. "We've already told some people you're living overseas." I felt physically sick. "What?" "It's easier this way." Easier. As if I were a problem that needed hiding. As if I were some embarrassing secret. I waited for someone to say they were joking. Nobody did. My father joined the conversation briefly. His words were even worse. "Just let Ethan have his day."
His day.
Apparently at the cost of pretending I didn't exist. I don't remember much after that. Only silence. Eventually, I ended the call. Then I sat alone in my apartment staring at my phone. The wedding invitation never arrived. Family messages stopped. Weeks passed without a single conversation. It was as if I had vanished. And maybe that's exactly what they wanted. So I gave them what they asked for. I stayed away. But on the morning of Ethan's wedding, something happened that none of us expected. At 7:12 a.m., My phone started ringing. Then it rang again.
And again.
And again. Within an hour, I had more missed calls than I'd received from my family in the previous 3 months combined. By 8:15 that morning, my phone had recorded 32 missed calls. Most were from Ethan. The rest came from my mother, my father, and even a few relatives who hadn't spoken to me in months. I stared at the screen in disbelief. 3 weeks earlier, these same people had decided I was too embarrassing to attend the wedding. Now they suddenly couldn't stop calling. I silenced the phone and made coffee. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing to solve a family emergency. If they wanted me gone, I was gone. Simple. But the calls kept coming. Every few minutes, another notification appeared. By 9 a.m., there were voicemails. Then text messages. Then more voicemails. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the first message. It was my mother. "Hannah, please call us back immediately." Her voice sounded strained. Not angry.
Panicked.
The second voicemail was from Ethan. "Hannah, I need to talk to you. Please answer." The confidence I'd heard during our last conversation was completely gone. The third message came from my father. "We have a situation." A situation. I almost laughed. For years, every family situation somehow became my responsibility. I listened to another voicemail. Then another. The desperation grew with each one. Nobody explained what was wrong. They just kept asking me to call back. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang again. This time the caller ID surprised me. Chloe's father. I had met him only twice. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." "Hannah?" he asked immediately. "Yes." The relief in his voice was obvious. "Thank goodness." I frowned. "What's happening?" There was a pause. Then he said something that made no sense. "Nobody can find the family records." I blinked. What family records? The wedding presentation. Suddenly, I understood. Months earlier, Chloe had wanted to create a video celebrating both families. Photos, stories, important milestones, historical documents, memories. Everyone had contributed materials, or at least they thought they had. The truth was different. I had organized everything. Every photo, every date, every scanned document, every labeled folder. Because whenever something required patience and attention to detail, it always landed on my desk. I remembered handing complete digital copies to Ethan months ago. Apparently, he hadn't paid much attention. "What happened?" I asked. "Nobody knows where the files are." I closed my eyes. Of course they didn't. Because Ethan had spent years taking credit for work other people did. And now the wedding was hours away. Guests had already arrived. The presentation was supposed to be shown during the reception. Important relatives had traveled across the country. Members of Chloe's family were asking questions. And nobody knew where anything was. Except me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Chloe's father sighed. "Hannah, there's something else." "What?" The family started arguing. My stomach tightened. "About what?" "About why you aren't here." "Interesting. Very interesting." Apparently, once guests began asking questions, the explanations started falling apart. Different relatives had been told different stories. Some thought I was traveling. Others believed I was sick. A few had been told I moved overseas. The lies were colliding with each other, and people were starting to notice. I thanked him and ended the call. A minute later, another text arrived from Ethan. "Please, just tell us where the files are. No apology. No explanation. Just another demand." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I opened my closet, pulled on a jacket, grabbed my keys. Because suddenly I realized something. They weren't calling because they missed me. They weren't calling because they regretted what they'd done. They were calling because the story they'd built was beginning to collapse. And as I drove toward the wedding venue, I had a feeling the missing files were no longer the biggest problem waiting for them there. By the time I arrived near the venue, the parking lot was already packed. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Guests in formal clothes moved between the ballroom and the outdoor reception area. From a distance, everything looked perfect. But the second I stepped inside, I could feel the tension. People weren't celebrating. They were whispering, watching, waiting. The moment Ethan saw me, he rushed across the lobby. Relief flooded his face. Hannah. Not, why are you here? Not, you weren't invited. Just Hannah. For the first time in weeks, he sounded like a brother instead of a stranger. Where are the files? He asked. I almost laughed. There it was. The real reason for the 94 missed calls. The first thing you say is hello? I asked. Ethan looked embarrassed. Hannah, please. Before I could answer, Chloe's father approached. Several guests followed behind him, including some of Ethan's future in-laws. The situation had clearly grown larger than anyone expected. One older gentleman looked directly at me. So you're Hannah? I nodded. The man frowned. Interesting. The word hung in the air, because everyone knew what it meant. Interesting that I existed. Interesting that nobody had mentioned me. Interesting that the stories didn't match. My mother suddenly appeared. Her face was pale. Tell them where the files are. I looked at her calmly. You mean the files I spent 6 months organizing? Nobody answered. I continued. The files I scanned, labeled, archived, and backed up? The silence grew uncomfortable. Chloe's father turned toward Ethan. Hannah did all that? Ethan shifted awkwardly. Well, she helped. Helped. I smiled sadly. That one word perfectly summarized my place in the family. The person who did the work always helped. The person who took the credit was always celebrated. For the first time, I decided not to stay quiet. I opened my bag and removed a flash drive. The presentation is here. Relief immediately spread across several faces. But I wasn't finished. For years, I've handled family records, anniversaries, photographs, travel planning, and events. The room grew quiet. I arranged Dad's retirement celebration. My father lowered his eyes. I organized Mom's 50th birthday. My mother said nothing. I created the family archives everyone keeps talking about today. Several relatives looked genuinely surprised. Because they hadn't known. Nobody had ever bothered telling them. The older gentleman folded his arms. So, why isn't she part of the wedding? No one answered. Not Ethan. Not my parents. Not anyone. The silence was devastating. Because the truth sounded ridiculous when spoken aloud. Eventually, Chloe stepped forward. She looked confused, then disappointed. Is it true? She asked Ethan. Ethan couldn't meet her eyes. That told everyone everything. For years, my family had hidden my contributions while enjoying the benefits. But lies become difficult to maintain once enough people start asking questions. My father finally cleared his throat. We made a mistake. My mother nodded slowly. A few relatives looked shocked. Others looked guilty. Ethan stared at the floor. For once, nobody was defending him. Nobody was explaining away his choices. Nobody was blaming someone else. I handed the flash drive to Chloe, then picked up my purse. Hannah, my mother said quietly. I stopped. We're sorry. I looked at all of them. Then I smiled. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the hurt disappeared. But because I no longer needed their approval. Take care of yourselves, I said. Then I walked away. Months later, life felt different. Lighter. My family finally understood something they should have learned years earlier. Respect matters. Truth matters. And people who spend years hiding someone's value often discover that the person they pushed aside was quietly holding everything together all along.